So this is really the session to dive in and get a basic 101 on it. Please ask the questions you have. As we keep saying, there are no stupid questions, especially in this realm. Because even as the chair of the board, and I've been part of this foundation or part of this movement since before the foundation a long time, and still, there's always, wait, what do we actually do with this or that? So please bring your questions to the table, and let's dive in. Pass it off to Aylene.
Great. Yeah. Hi. So my name is Aylene McCallum. I'm the Director of Partnerships and Development at the OMF, and this is my colleague,
Mitch Vars, and I'm the Technical Development Specialist at the OMF.
And we are so pleased that you were vulnerable enough to come here and say, I don't know something, and I don't know everything that's being discussed. And we're going to hopefully go over some of the basics of what the OMF is and the data specifications that we steward. We want to create a safe space. I know that a lot of people are up in the rafters in this room, but we would actually we think it's a small enough group. We would love it if we could go around the room really quickly and have you introduce yourself. It'll help Mitch and I kind of understand what you're looking for. These are pretty easy questions to answer, but for the sake of time, maybe keep your answer to the last one, why you chose to come to this breakout session, as brief as possible, and then we'll make sure to dive into who the OMF is and what we do. Can I start with you? Okay, maybe stand up and just, I don't know, is this going to work if I let people take my mic? Oh, yes, you guys are organized. Sorry, it was kind of a last minute. By the way, Mitch and I are hosting this session because the OMF Summit became so popular that we decided as a team we needed to add a third breakout session. So if things seem a little clunky right now, that's the reason why. Because we did decide to introduce this. Oh, perfect. Yes. Really quick. Yeah.
So hi, I'm Chris Shaman. I'm co-founder of a company called Deepen Analytics. We're trying to help solve the EV charging infrastructure.
Perfect. Yes.
We've messed a few things up, so I'm happy we can help here as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hello, I'm George Coda. I'm a client partner on the Verizon IoT team. I work in the IoT and across all industries for IoT for Verizon. I chose this breakout session just to learn a little bit more about OMF.
Great.
Obviously with data and automation and smart cities and smart traffic comes wireless connectivity, and I just want to see where we can help partner in that space and see what we can do.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Tina Williams. I'm with ITS America. I'm the Director of Policy and Stakeholder Engagement, and I came to this session to learn more.
Perfect.
Hi everyone, I'm Daniel. I'm a recent college grad, and I'm just here to learn more about urban mobility management and chose this session. Yeah, to learn more about OMF.
Great. Thank you, Daniel.
Hi, my name is Anna Kelly. I'm Senior Policy Advisor for Electric Vehicles and Parking in the City of Philadelphia. And I'm here because our Smart Cities team in Philly is doing a really great job with being super involved, and I'd like to bring a lot of this knowledge to our Office of Transportation Infrastructure Systems.
Perfect.
Hi everybody, my name is Luca. I work for TomTom, North America. I'm the team leader for our traffic services in America, in the America region. I'm here to learn more as much as possible. It's always good.
Hi, I'm Jacob Wessel. I'm an independent public space and placemaking consultant, and used to work for the City of Boston, so familiar with the MDS work, but want to learn more about the curb specification.
Great.
Hey, Ramses again. Not only am I here to intro, but also, honestly, spec moves so fast that getting a little refresher for myself when I have the talks about this is helpful.
That's awesome.
I'm City of Amsterdam, so please Mitch, tell me something more about the tech, because I not always understand the technology, so that's why I'm also here to learn.
Hi, I'm Mike from IPS Group, working as a senior project program manager, and we deal with the city and a lot of other vendors for data exchange. So this is one of our favorite topic today.
Hello everyone, my name is Kush Makwana and I'm a software engineer at IPS Group in San Diego. And I'm here to learn more about the future of data standards. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dora Makita. I'm with Sam Schwartz Engineering. I'm a transportation planner with the company, and I'm interested in getting a deeper understanding of OMF.
Hi everyone, my name is Helena Dolan, pronouns are she, her. I work at LADOT, I'm a data analyst, and I've read a lot of the documentation that you guys have on, your website, on GitHub, but I'm always interested in the nitty-gritty technical details as well, so I'm here to learn more about that. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Norma Villacrez. Excuse me, I'm a GIS specialist with LADOT, and I'm here to learn a little bit more about the OMF and try to familiarize myself with it.
Perfect.
Hi, my name is Jeannie Park. I'm also with LADOT, with my colleagues here. I am working on RFP for our car share, and I want to know what I can ask bidders. I too need to know more about the language and need to know what I'm asking for. So.
Hi, I'm Hussein Tapia. I'm with Spot Genius. I'm an integration manager. So interoperability is a big thing for us. We integrate with all enforcement provider, reservation provider, payment providers. So really looking forward to figure out what's the standardization here and learn a little bit more about that.
Hi there, I'm Ryan Russo. I'm Executive Director of NACTO, the National Association of City Transportation Officials. Hi, members. I am here because I'm kind of old and all this computer software stuff is really confusing and big data stuff, so need to learn that. But also, NACTO's just put out, with the help of our members, a policy paper on autonomous vehicle policy, and we called for the use of MDS in the robotaxi industry, so want to learn about exactly what we're calling for to happen.
That is awesome.
Hi, good afternoon. Craig Hutton. I'm from Transport Canada. I'm the Associate Assistant Deputy Minister. And we have a lot of different initiatives with data, including around multimodal freight movements, and particularly a lot of data initiatives around airports and the passenger journey. So looking at ways to improve governance.
Hi, I'm Austin Marshburn. I'm the Vice President for Government Partnerships for bird and spin vehicles. And I came here because I'm always interested in understanding better how we can partner with our cities and understanding how we can make sure that they get the data they need to make the decisions they need for curb space and moving people around their cities.
Hi, I'm Aries Ledesma. I'm a partner in a company called Nortel. We're a technology consultancy, and we work with a lot of governments and private enterprises all around the world on digital transformation projects, and more specifically data, AI, and cybersecurity.
Hi, my name is Mary Rose Bissinger. I am a transportation planner with Fair and Peers with a data science background, and also looking to learn more about the technical nitty-gritty and how getting involved in contributing through a working group looks like.
Hi, I'm Brian Simmons. I'm from the Mitre Corporation, and we are interested in accelerating government technology adoption and modeling government decision making. So we're interested in looking to partner more with OMF as we do common mission.
I'm Josh Lynch, and I'm with the City of Portland. Very interested in looking at MDS for our taxi fleet, but also CDS. Relatively familiar with MDS, but CDS is a thing that I haven't looked at much yet, so happy to learn.
Hey, I'm Jason from Modi. You can call me J-Dog, keep it easy. So we've implemented CDS as a standard across all our products, 100% compliant, so I'm hear some feedback from others on, how they're progressing with it, maybe what the barriers of entry are in implementing it from maybe a product and a city standpoint.
Hi, I'm Alex Cavanaugh with HNTB, a consultant firm based in Chicago. I lead a team of software engineers and just really looking to hear more about the future and direction of MDS and CDS.
Hi, Dan Murphy. I lead policy and government affairs for Replica. We're a big data provider to state DOTs, transit agencies, cities, and MPOs. I'm here to learn more about the OMF, its data specs, and how we could potentially partner with the OMF.
Hi, my name is Jonah. I'm a research fellow with the Shared Use Mobility Center, or SUMSI, and I'm interested in learning more about MDS and CDS and how we can use it in our research projects on micromobility and mobility hubs.
Hello, my name is Vishikesh Balal. I run a company called Open Skies, and I'm the project maintainer for something called OpenUTM, which is for airspace management. And I know OMF has some activities on urban air mobility as well, so I'm here to learn more about some of the foundations.
Hey everybody, I'm Michael Kelly with Mosey, autonomous shuttle company. I'm a chief of strategy, and we're looking to become members with the OMF and just want to learn more how we can work together.
I'm Gio Ferrigno with Mosey as well, and same thing.
Well, thank you for taking the time to have us go around the room and meet everybody that's here to learn more about the OMF and the data specifications that we steward. So I'm going to do a really quick overview of the OMF and kind of what we stand for, what we work on. And then Mitch will dive into the standards and specifications a little bit more. And hopefully we'll have time at the end to answer any specific questions. If we don't, definitely want to invite you to approach myself or Mitch after the session, maybe at our happy hour tonight, to ask those questions. And if we don't get a chance to talk to you in person, certainly reach out to us, or we're not hard to find. Mitch is a minor celebrity in the data standards world, and there aren't very many transportation folks named Aylene out there. So like I said, Google us, we're not hard to find, and reach out to us. So the OMF was founded about 5 years ago to really gather by transportation executives who are working in leading cities around the US and around the world, trying to answer this question of what could we do if we could gather more information to help challenge some of the modern transportation, to address some of the modern transportation challenges that cities were facing when scooters were dropped in their cities almost 10 years ago, when the challenges of getting people around cities safely were confronted with also how do we deliver goods and services in ever popular streets around our cities. And then also, can we use data and the new technology to try to create safer streets and to combat traffic safety issues like what we see above me? So we're really an organization that brings together the public sector, the private sector, and consultants that bring all of these people together. So really bringing people together around a conversation about how can we use technology to advance our policy goals in cities. And really think of us as a neutral third-party organization that we're governed by public sector transportation executives, which is a really unique aspect of our organization because the data specifications that we steward really help us manage public space. And so we have felt very strongly that our organization should be and remains governed by public sector transportation executives. One of the things that I think distinguishes the OMF, not only as a membership organization, but as that neutral third-party organization, is that we've spent a lot of time educating cities around the use of technology for managing the public realm. We can also be a great resource for cities to come and ask and say, hey, I need to get this data into a better methodology or a better way to better tool for gathering the data. I need that. Can you help connect us to some private sector organizations that are working on this? And then we can help connect them to organizations that are working on this. And then what I think the best resource we are is a forum for bringing the public sector and the private sector together to talk about how technology can be used to help solve some of these policy objectives and help solve these problems and identify these solutions together, as I noted in the slide. And one of the other things that I really like to focus on, I'm not quite sure it's easy to read this on the screen, so I am going to read this slide. It's really important that we are really aiming to cultivate that unified digital infrastructure ecosystem so that companies and public agencies can focus their attention on innovating instead of integrating. A lot of energy is being spent by the public and the private sector literally cleaning information, and that time that is spent cleaning and integrating information is time that is not spent on solving problems, on innovating the technology. So we would rather let's all rally around the same way that we're going to talk about something so that we can spend time actually innovating and solving more problems together. So very briefly, and then Mitch is going to get into this, standards benefit public agencies by simply creating an entry point, an accessible entry point to build a foundation for more innovation. Digital management of policies helps to reduce operating costs. We know how much cities don't have enough resources, so let's stop burdening them with more and more systems for managing information. Let's give them a tool where they can share information in one language. Digital standards also help our cities adapt to planned events much more quickly, unplanned events too, and emergencies. So they can adapt to this, to these new things that are coming up much more quickly and have responsive ecosystems. And then the standards benefit public agencies by giving them an opportunity to plan more effectively and be better program managers. For companies, it allows you to scale much more quickly. You don't have to develop a new way of talking to a city each time you go. I mean, Mosey is a perfect example of that. You're a brand new company. You're introducing a new technology. You can pop to new jurisdictions really quickly and not have to redevelop a way to talk to them each time. And with that, at the end of the day, we are trying to advance the state of practice, and we're really just helping to create these digital languages and tools that are going to help cities achieve their policy objectives. With that, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Mitch to get into the nitty-gritty.
So OMF is mostly known for two data specifications, mobility data specification and curb data specification. They are, if you were going to go to a conference in LA, say 25 years ago, you probably would have to start by either calling or visiting a travel agent. Anybody ever use a travel agent in the distant past? Old enough to remember that? I'm going to guess that no one in the room did that to get here. And one of the reasons for that is because the airlines long ago got together and standardized their data. And so now we can use a service like Kayak or Expedia, or you can go directly to the airlines through your web browser, and you can put in the place you're at and where you want to get to and the dates when you want to travel and get a long list of options for and pricing and all of the information that you need to book your flight. It used to be much more complicated than that, but data standards make that all possible. That process of putting in your origin and destination and your dates, you're using an API to exchange data with a very complex back end at the airlines that nobody in the room probably has, well, maybe there's someone in the airline, who's in the airlines here, has the capacity to understand. The APIs make that possible. And so that's analogous to what OMF does. We develop these blueprints, data specifications, for building APIs to help cities manage mobility and curbs. What's a data specification? A data specification works like a dictionary. So you have a list of items of data. So over here on the left, I have an item of data. This is from CDS called rate. And over here, there's a description that says it's the rate for a parking space in cents or the smallest denomination of local currency. The actual JSON that would be in your CDS API at the bottom. Easy to read, rate is 500, so I know by the description that means $5, and the cost is per hour. The data specification lets all parties who are interacting with the data agree on exactly what the data represents, and that's the magic. These are what are called open standards. There's no universal definition of what an open standard is, but we use open standards for lots of things in our daily life. Everyone's probably familiar with PDFs. If you use the internet at all, you're interacting with HTML. If you're in the transportation field, you may be familiar with GTFS. GTFS is used to describe timetables, routes for public transit. It's one of the things that kind of started this movement towards data standardization in the mobility space in 2005. Let me go back a little bit. So things that they all have in common are that they're free to use and they're unrestricted. You can access the data and work with the data and not pay for it. They're publicly documented. They're actively maintained by an independent organization like the OMF. That organization has transparent and inclusive governance, and there's an open community of contributors and users who are able to give input to the development of the standards and how they should be expanded. MDS was created to address a problem that cropped up in cities in the late 20-teens, so around 2018. Prior to that, shared mobility was typically small in scale. It was run by cities or nonprofits, and one thing that almost all cities had in common is that shared mobility was a monopoly in each city that it operated in. So there would be one provider, one system, one per city. Suddenly in 2018, 2019, we had 2, 5, 10 providers in a city. A lot of capital came in, they scaled very quickly, and there were a bunch of issues that cropped up right away. And so a group of cities got together and said, we need a way to regulate and manage this. We need a shared language. MDS was the result. It's a two-way system. It allows cities to publish their regulations to be consumed through an API by the mobility providers, by the companies operating in the right-of-way. And it allows those companies to publish various metrics and data about the activities that are happening in the right-of-way. So that's things like availability, location of vehicles, routes that those vehicles took, origin and destination points, and so forth. So around that time, 2018, 2019, we saw a lot of scenes like are on the left here, where we had rights of way that were obstructed. Shared mobility was causing a bunch of issues for cities. There was a backlash against it. Many of the companies that came into the market early have since gone bankrupt or gone out of business. This was bad all around. It was bad for everyone. It was bad for pedestrians, obviously. It was bad for the companies who were operating these vehicles because they saw very quickly saw increasing rates of vandalism. It was bad for cities. It soured people on the concept of shared mobility and set the industry back quite a bit for the first few years until things became more orderly. Any goal that your city has around a mobility system, all of those goals, whether they be congestion mitigation, air quality, climate, and so forth, they all hinge on ridership. And if you have poor quality of service, like is pictured here, ridership is going to suffer, and then all of those other goals will suffer in turn. So this is my aspirational picture. With adequate regulation and management of the right-of-way, we can have more orderly systems. Our other project is CDS, the curb data specification. Curb data specification is primarily used by cities to publish curb regulation data. So in the diagram, the city depicted at the top in black. The green arrow is the curbs API. That's curb regulation data. That's how is this curb section, this parking space, this loading zone, regulated. It goes out to people who are wishing to use that space. Can be consumed by taxis, by delivery companies, by freight, logistics. Events that happen at the curb, so these are parking events, loading zone events, pickup and drop off, those kinds of things can be captured through the events API, transferred back to the city, and there's a metrics API that is a suite of kind of standard metrics, things like utilization and dwell time and so forth, that the city can use to analyze its curb, understand what's happening on the street, and adjust its regulations accordingly. The process of digitizing the curb is big, as we've heard in previous sessions today. It's the kind of the first step in starting to use these types of technologies, and it can be overwhelming to even large cities. But most cities already have a bunch of different data that they're working with that can be translated into CDS. So this could be first of all, it's your parking regulations. It may be in your municipal code. It may be in your records from your sign shop. You may have GIS data. You've probably got data related to parking transactions. So maybe you're using Park Mobile or some company like that, and you would have historic data about parking transactions, where they took place. All of that can be used to start to develop your digital curb. And so even though you're not using CDS today, you may have data that can be translated into CDS so that you can actually look back in time and have a better understanding of how your curbs are being used. Some of it has to be captured in the field. There's a bunch of different vendors now who are offering services using LiDAR, using OCR, where imagine like the Google car that you see driving around with the cameras on it. They have similar systems. They drive through the city. The LiDAR is capturing like the position of the fire hydrant. OCR is reading the text off your road signs, and then that can be translated into CDS to build your digital curb model. And then finally, when that data is captured, then you would publish your public APIs that would be consumed by companies who are looking to access your curbs. And that's all.
And that's it. So, given our two brief presentations, we did try to keep them brief and high level on purpose so that you have time to ask questions that you may have. Is there anybody, we should have peppered this crowd with softball questions. The Mosey group is going to give us one, hopefully.
Hopefully. So, you have a subset of existing information that you're helping build standards around, right? But let's say that we are capturing information that might be new, that historically, cities and such haven't actually had the ability to capture. What does that look like when we come to you and say, hey, we have a new piece of information we think is really valuable to the cities. How do we get this information added to the standards?
So let me talk about it from an engagement perspective, and then Mitch, do you want to get into the technical aspect of that? So from an engagement perspective, the OMF is an open source organization, and as much as we're a membership organization, we're an open source organization first. So you can become engaged in the work that we do and trying to kind of influence the data specifications without ever becoming a member. And my job is actually to encourage all of you to think about membership, but I'm a pretty authentic person and I like to first get you engaged in the work we do. So first I want you to come to our working groups that happen every 4 weeks for each of the 2 data specifications, or simply become engaged digitally in the conversation on our GitHub. And so you as Mosey would say, hey, our technology actually has the ability to collect this type of information. We don't see a way to express that right now with MDS. And so you'd come to the working group or you'd post something on GitHub and you'd say, how can MDS maybe be modified to include this and include this in your dictionary, if you will. And so that's how the conversation begins. And now I will hand it over to Mitch to talk about the rest of it.
You didn't leave me much to talk about.
Oh, good.
I would say you attend the working group meetings, which happen monthly and are open to the public. You don't have to be a member. And then open an issue on GitHub and focus an issue on a particular use case. Say this is a thing that we've been trying to solve. This is a problem that my city is looking for a solution to. This is a piece of data that we have that we think cities should be making use of, and that will get a discussion going. And once that discussion reaches a certain point, we may bring it to a working group meeting and spend 20 minutes or half an hour or the entire meeting on it and talk about how it would interact with the rest of the specification, whether or not this issue can already be solved with the current specification or whether we need to make changes to it, whether those changes are breaking or not. And that would get it into the flow so it would become part of a future release.
Did that help? Okay.
So can you help me understand the ConOps a little bit more for the CDS? And so, like, here's a scenario. If I run a grocery delivery service and every morning I go out and I'm going to double park or do what I have to do to deliver groceries around the city, am I just going to be a consumer of that data that's being pushed out so I can understand the state of the curb and policies, or am I supposed to be participating, contributing data back? And if so, what compels me to do that? I might prefer to remain invisible. So, great question. And I think the answer to that is both. You would potentially be a consumer. So you may have, like we've had some discussions with some of the big logistics companies like FedEx or UPS. They all have a bespoke application running on a tablet in their truck that routes their drivers to, only make right turns to deliver all their packages, things like that. And they are looking at using this in cities where they would have potentially real-time availability information on loading zones. So you would know where you needed to go, and you could find where the closest loading zone was to that address and whether or not there was already a truck in it. That real-time availability is done with either pavement sensors or cameras on the street. That's the responsibility of the cities, probably. So they would be providing that real-time data to the data consumers, the logistics company. Ideally, we would be receiving data, the city would be receiving data back from the logistics company. They might be requesting access to a space in advance of getting there. So they may be saying, I need a loading zone for 15 minutes in this area of downtown, and then be directed to one that's available. They may be supplying event data back to the city that the city is going to capture and store so that they can analyze it later and figure out how to better optimize their curb space.
I think I'm going to answer a part of your question, what compels you to use it? I would say that what might compel you to use it is hopefully not regulation, actually. Hopefully it's because it actually saves your company money. To the FedEx delivery question, of routing through right turns. Well, what if it could save you from getting a ticket because it, identifies where the open parking spaces are for delivery, and it directs you to a space where you're not going to get a ticket, or it helps you save time, and so your delivery driver can actually make more deliveries within their shift. So I think in an ideal world that the specifications work in the way that they save the organization, the private company, money, and so they want to use it because it optimizes their business. There will be some regulation, though. That's absolutely a part of the conversation, but that's not really what we don't really want to lead with. That's just a tool that a city has in their toolbox.
So I basically have a two-part question. So at Spot Genius, what we do is we deal with a lot of open parking lots. right? So I do see the data specification for the curbside. Is that same specification can be used for open parking lot for like, let's say LPR entries and occupied free spot availability. Also, and then the second part of the question is, what's the percentage of adoption rate of the OMF in general? Like in US, at least, let's start there. And is there more than, what are the different sources of, socializing this in terms of the the OMF in general, basically? So just two-part question.
Parking lots. So CDS was initially focused on street side, on curbside, so not so much on parking lots, but it is flexible enough that it could be applied to parking lot. And many of the vendors that are working with CDS are also working in that space. So they're using computer vision to map individual spaces in a lot. They could produce CDS events based on that mapping and provide availability data and so forth. So I think that's very possible. As far as the adoption, I'll talk about each specification independently. They're quite a bit different. With MDS is really widely used around the world, widely used throughout Europe, widely used throughout the US. It was adopted very quickly because there was really this pre-existing need. Cities were kind of over a barrel and needed a way to get a handle on these new services that were turning up in the right-of-way, so it took off really fast. CDS, on the other hand, is very different because of the previous question. What are the use cases? What's in it for the businesses who would be consuming this data and so forth? And this overwhelming task, or seemingly overwhelming task, of digitizing an entire city's curb space. Right now, through the USDOT SMART program, we've got 10 cities that each have $2 million in funding to do this work. So 10 of the major US cities are in the middle of projects now to either do a pilot area of their city, or in some cases, San Francisco, for example, they're digitizing the entire curb border to border. So I think within the next 1 to 2 years, we're going to see this really start to ramp up and get a lot more attention.
So who's hosting the data, and like what networks are, is this, so who would be hosting the data, and also what network, I mean, are you running over like LTE, are you running over local area networks, like how would that data be transmitted?
Who's hosting the data? So this is a great question. One of the things that cities should be thinking about is who's gonna store the data and who's gonna own the data. It's the way that most cities are going right now is that they're working with a private party to collect and store the curb data. A number of the vendors are in attendance here today, and in that case, you should have in your agreements with that vendor that your city has ownership of that data, so that if they go out of business or they no longer provide that service in the future or something, because your data is standardized, it becomes portable and you can move it to another vendor, or you can bring it in-house. There are other cities that have more robust IT departments and so forth, and they're doing it on their own. They're storing the data in-house. To the IoT question, it depends on the technology. So for the APIs, if you have a fully digitized curb, you've built your digital model of your curb, your city is publishing APIs, those are published over the internet. If you're relying on cameras and sensors, then it depends on the vendor. And I think that's analogous to the shared mobility space, where you have an IoT module on every scooter in the city, and they're using the same types of services.
This is a good question, though, because we definitely need to build partnerships with the data providers and the platforms. Yes, so we're very pleased that you're here. Thank you.
To what level, if any, will OMF on cities overlap with or integrate with public EV charging?
That is an open topic in the CDS specification now. So we have a project that we're calling curb objects. So this is anything that sits on your curb. So it could be a bench or a trash can or an EV charger.
Or a tree.
Or a tree. These are things that live on the sidewalk and may get in the way of your delivery truck, or may be tied to a service like charging an EV. And so we do have basic information about EV charging now, but there are like a half a dozen different EV charger data standards out there in the world, and we're trying to figure out how much of it do we bring into our specification and how much of it do we rely on existing specs to handle. So.
Those were really good questions, though. You guys hit on a lot of the things that I think we were trying to elicit from you in terms of questions. So everything you guys asked, they were really on point.
We had someone up here who was talking about an RFP.
Oh, yeah.
And
who is here to ask about that?
RFP is one of my favorite topics. Prior to MDS, and it's only partially been resolved. Prior to MDS, every RFP for shared mobility looked different. And it was I used to be a bike share operator, and I spent lots of time reading RFPs and consulting with cities on writing RFPs. And it was as if they were writing them out of whole cloth every time, and no two looked alike, and everyone had a long table in it of data sharing requirements, and none of the data sharing requirements matched from city to city. That was a really bad situation for operators, because they had to spend an inordinate amount of time responding to RFPs to try to win these bids. And it wasn't very helpful to cities either, because they were all collecting different data. And they were usually looking a month back. They were saying, every month we want a report that shows X, Y, and Z. And that's a terrible way to manage your right-of-way, because if you have a problem that's impacting your residents, it's going to be impacting them for at least a month before you even know about it and get around to addressing it. So the idea behind MDS was that we would have a standardized set of data that all cities would be using, and they would no longer have to make these bespoke requests to the operators. It would make things more efficient for the operators. It would make things more efficient for the cities, because they could work together with peer cities and address the problems that they were trying to solve. So we have sample language at OMF to help people write RFPs that you can copy and paste. And if you'd like to get in touch with us, we'd be happy to hook you up. But I would like to make a case for more carrots for operators and less sticks. In too many cases, regulation is looked at as we have these rules, and if you don't follow these rules, we're going to punish you, and those punishments are usually financial, and it's very difficult for any of these companies to run these systems profitably. Usually, if you're exacting a lot of fees from a company, it leads to poor quality of service, because they don't have the capacity to spend more money to improve things for their users if they're paying a lot of money to the city. There's a lot of things that you can do in terms of incentives. You can say, these are my city's goals, and if you're able to achieve those goals, then we'll raise the cap on the number of vehicles you're allowed to operate. We'll lower the fees per vehicle that we're charging you, and so forth like that. And most companies have been quite responsive to those kinds of arrangements.
I think Mitch really touches on one of the benefits of the OMF being this neutral organization that comes and builds a place for people to have those conversations. So a operator is able to come and say, well, I've got this new technology, this is what I can do. And the city can say, you know what, that's not exactly what we need it to do. That's not in line with our objectives, but tell me more about this technology. And it creates a nice, safe place for them to have that conversation and hopefully suss out like where that new technology and that new service can really help that city achieve their goals. And then they can have a nice conversation. They can build and innovate the specs around this new technology, kind of what Mosey was asking about earlier. And again, at the end of the day, spend more time getting to a place where we're innovating and solving problems together versus spending all of our energy integrating the technology and cleaning it up. And that's just busy work that, maybe we enjoy to do in a mindless state, but it's really not helping the city better manage the public realm for its citizens. And that's what cities are tasked to do. That's what their job is. That's what they have to go back, and that's what mayors get elected on, and that's what transportation directors get hired on. So how can your technology help them achieve their goals?
Touching more about how this is saving us like cleaning and processing time of data. So LADOT has a third party that processes and cleans that data for us, which is great. But I'm just curious, how much do these data standards completely eliminate the cleaning and data processing process, or is there still like cleanup that still has to occur because data is kind of inevitably messy?
I think that's an ongoing issue. So the standards have certainly led to better data quality, but it's the level of compliance with the specification that's the question. So if a vendor, if an operator is really adhering to the exact definitions that are in the specification for your vendor that's doing your work, it's going to come in a form that they're able to use, and they probably don't have to do a lot of cleanup on it. That's not always the case, and probably one of our future steps is building more tooling around data validation so that we can provide feedback to people who are publishing these specifications or data using these specifications about the quality of their data and where they need to improve.
So I'll also add, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. We kind of have to use this stuff and also have those bad experiences and negative experiences to understand how it could be abused, so that we can then get enough feedback and enough tools and just the language to be able to say, no, we actually need you to specify that, deliver the information in this exact format. And then we need partners to come to the OMF and support us so that we have the resources at the OMF. And we're only 5 years old. We're a very young organization. But we need the resources, both political resources and financial resources, to be able to put together that validation process. But I'll also add, as someone who's done a lot of research in her career too, you're always going to be cleaning a little bit of data. It's more about are you cleaning 100% of the data, or are you cleaning 5% of the data? And if you're only cleaning 5% of the data, that does translate to a lot of time saved at the end of the day.
I could say that Europe is way ahead of us in this regard with the National Access Point program. Many of the countries, Norway comes to mind, so National Access Point is something that's mandated in all of the European Union countries, where there needs to be a single point where you can get all of their transportation data from, and all providers are required to submit to that point where it's then republished. And because it's centralized that way, and it's a part of their public policy, the people that manage those access points are able to push back when data quality is poor, and they're able to say, look, you need to fix this or you won't be in compliance. And in the past 2 years, they've really made lots of headway in improving the quality and clarity and completeness of all of their transportation data. So.
I mean, when a system works like that, it saves everybody time. And for a private sector company, time is profit, right? So if we can get that system and everyone's speaking the same language, the quicker we can get to that, the more money that can be made out there to speak in a very business-like language, and more innovation can happen, more problem solving can happen. But otherwise, it's like an anchor just dragging everyone along.
So I guess how similar is the data structures between the European data center and OMF data? Are we populating 2/3 of our data out?
So OMF doesn't collect any data. Maybe that's the place to start. people come to us and say, well, where do we get the MDS? And we say, well, go talk to your cities, because we don't ever see it. That's one of the things that makes managing MDS in particular very challenging, is that MDS is typically private information because it allows you to track the user's travel behavior. So I can identify a vehicle, and there's a user of that vehicle, and I know where they started and where they ended.
This is probably a good place to point out the GDPR compliance.
And so because of that, this is PII. This is personally identifiable information, and it needs to be kept under lock and key. And so it's typically or always not shared with OMF. We don't ever see these APIs once they're implemented. Cities see them. Cities, vendors that they contract with see them, but we don't see any of it. In the European Union, that's quite a bit different, where the national access points collect data from all the cities for one country.
I looked up to Hema because I had a feeling she might be able to contribute to that feedback and that question. Hema is our board member out of the Netherlands, if you didn't see the presentation earlier.
So hi everyone. So in Europe, the MDS API is used widely, and we made it privacy proof, so it does really make sure it follows all the requirements we have in Europe. So all the cities can use it. So the API is just the connector with the mobility company and the city, and it's a data exchange. So the Open Mobility Foundation doesn't get the data. The cities get the data, or usually it's a third party. And on the privacy levels, we are going to aggregate all that data to make sure that it's anonymous and you cannot follow the persons there. We also have European bodies that develop data standards. We have SEN, we have NetEx, Siri, but they're not really making data standards specifically for exchange of data for micromobility. So MBS APIs is not something that existed before in Europe. That's why it's being used very widely. And we try to work closely, the OMF together with Europe. We also have the discussions in European Commission on how we should govern and how we should get broader acceptance there, but still it's not a European-based, European-made data standard, so that is always a problem. But we really try to align that there, and that's why it can be used everywhere.
Hi, I'm trying to figure out how to articulate my question, my conundrum, and it's about GTFS. So it's a different standard, but I think this issue might apply to multiple mobility data standards. So I work for a transit agency, Go Triangle, and there's a number of other transit agencies in our region, and we all produce GTFS, or rather our CAD AVL technology vendors produce our GTFS and GTFS real-time schedules and feeds for us, and we all have different CAD AVL vendors, so the GTFS feeds that we produce, they're all to the standard, but they're all slightly different. And then we try to point them all at an endpoint, or have an endpoint grab all of them, like Google Maps or other trip planners, because we have different vendors producing to the standard, we end up with just these weird differences and these, it's just, it's a standard, but somehow we're in a place where it's not standardized. Our vendors don't have a whole lot of incentive to improve the way what they're doing. I mean, it might be a line in an RFP saying, you'll produce a GTFS feed for us, but that's about it. I mean, they want to keep us as customers, but they do a lot more than our GTFS. So I'm just curious, if you have any thoughts about kind of dealing with, like we have these standards, but we're sort of at the mercy of our vendors to publish to the standards. and we end up as a region with a bunch of transit agencies with standardized data that's no longer standard?
Good question. I've seen with some of the big data consumers, Google or Apple, where there's another layer in between the agency or your contractor that does some cleanup on the data before it gets to Google. They may aggregate multiple cities together into one like master feed. I'm a little bit more familiar with it in terms of shared mobility than I am GTFS, but so there's a space in between some of these big companies. I've also seen Google publish their own requirements for GTF and GBFS, where they request specific fields and specific endpoints, and they have kind of put another layer on top of the standards to say the specification allows you to do it this way or this way, and we want it like this. So some of that has fallen on the data consumers to say exactly how they want to receive it. And then there's this piece about data validation and quality, and to make sure that what you're publishing actually is in compliance with the standards. GTFS has great validation tools, less so than we have for MDS or CDS. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Do you mind if I add something there?
Yeah, go ahead.
Ramses from the OMF board. Another thing we've done in San Jose, the city I work in, as well as other cities, is we're putting in the contract language. We're putting in the contract language requirements for whoever is going to implement the standard that they must keep up with the current specification. Right? Because what a lot of times happens is a company comes in and says, all right, we've come to a new client. They build an implementation to the specification at that date, and then they don't put anybody keeping monitoring the growth of the specification. OMF exists to not only maintain but to evolve the specification, and there's reasons for those those evolutions. And if you don't put it in your contract, the companies don't have, the folks don't have a motivation to keep it up. Some do, some don't, but to try to keep it live with the current piece, you could build directly in your contract that requirement. That helps. At the same time, anytime you make data, there's always the one programmer saw the bit this way and that way, you get a little difference. But it's a great way to kind of keep fresh on what's happening.
And encourage them to become involved in the OMF. I mean, or I guess in that sense, is that mobility data. But my point is encourage your vendors to be not on an island, collecting this data and cleaning it out, on their own. Have them be involved in the community and make sure that they're participating. If they're running into problems, let us know. Let the community know so that we can address those. With these data specifications, we're not doing this just because we're trying to make it easier for technology to be in service of the public good. And if we don't have that communication in place, that doesn't happen. I mean, seems pretty obvious, but sometimes we have to remind people to communicate.
So a non-technical question. So after curbs and the MDS, what is the next mobility challenge that OMF? Do you have, what's on the horizon? What's the next big mobility challenge that OMF intends to tackle?
Well, I think we're getting close to time, so that is probably a really great question for Mitch and I to answer and close this session out and give you guys a few minutes of free time before we get going. I think that Mitch has a suggestion or something in mind, but really quickly, this is the same guy that asked about double parking in his question earlier, and I laughed when he started to reference double parking because if I remember, I'm the non-technical person on staff. If I remember correctly, double parking is this really interesting use case where the two specifications could possibly merge because the double parking instance happens in the right-of-way where there's supposed to be moving objects in the right-of-way, but it's related to a stationary space at the curb. So I'll leave it at that and then let Mitch. I'm really curious what Mitch has to say.
I think there's a number of kind of hot topics right now in the space. One is AAM, Advanced Air Mobility, so flying cars is the shorthand for it, and it's hard to tell if it's more hype than reality. We were all expecting to see these at the Paris Olympics, and we didn't, and now we're expecting to see them at the Los Angeles Olympics in 4 years. But there are a number of companies that are promising us that this is right around the corner, and cities are already are kind of trying to be forward thinking about this because they don't want to get they don't want to have a situation like when the TNCs started and they weren't prepared to make the proper types of data requests of these companies to be able to manage them. And then the other one has to do with road safety and intersections, and which is related to the double parking. The thing about it's important to understand about CDS as it exists currently is that it's concerned with the curb lane, the lane which is immediately adjacent to the curb. But if you're talking about double parking, that happens in a travel lane, which is one lane out from the curb. And as Aylene said, that would be a curb event, which could be associated with that space along the curb. But the place in space out in the roadway where it's taking place currently isn't part of the data model. And that's one of the things that we're looking at addressing in the future.
And I'll just also add, less so on actually adding new capabilities, like or new dimensions maybe to MDS or CDS with the double parking or AAM is simply about, and Mitch touched on it, is just road safety. How can we maybe use MDS to make communication with autonomous vehicles more clear, or connected vehicles? What if it's just a connected vehicle? Basically the cars that are coming out right now, they have those capabilities. And this is definitely like a what if type of scenario, but what if your connected vehicle could remind you that you're driving through a school zone, and if you don't react properly, literally throttle the speed of your vehicle, so that if you're like too worried about like what's gonna happen at work today and your mind's off in nowhere land, and you just miss the kid walking down the street, if the worst thing happens and your car does come in contact with that child, that at least it's at a lower speed where hopefully their life will be saved, right? And I think that's the type of application that I would love the OMF to have more of a conversation in and a lot more application in. That type of conversation is complicated and deep, and it requires a lot of partnerships. So with that, I hope all of you have been inspired to become a little bit more involved in the OMF, and that Mitch and I have given you something to think about of what the capabilities are with MDS, CDS, and the OMF. So I hope you get more involved.